Say it again. Play search warrant.
Every few years, a new drug becomes the monster. A new face for an old fear. Ice, bath salts, fentanyl, nitazines, tranq. The names change. The machine does not. This is not a film about one drug. It is about a machine that turns pain into profit, fear into policy, and people into targets. This part of the story doesn't begin in an alley. It begins in a doctor's office. In the mid-1990s, the Sackler family-owned company Purdue Pharma pushed a powerful opioid called OxyContin as a safer answer to pain. Sales reps were trained to overcome doubt, increase prescriptions, play down the risk of addiction, and keep the product moving. Purdue paid doctors large sums through speaking fees, lavish conferences, and promotional events. Some were paid tens of thousands of dollars a year. The Sackler family made campaign donations to politicians. Academic institutions and universities in the United States and the United Kingdom accepted significant funding, amounting to tens of millions of dollars. Patients were given starter pack coupons for OxyContin that provided free prescriptions for a 7 to 30-day supply. This was medicine dressed in respectability, but driven by sales. Far from being safe, OxyContin helped ignite one of the deadliest drug crises in modern history. The damage did not arrive all at once. It spread quietly. Through doctors' rooms, through pharmacies, through medicine cabinets, through workplaces, suburbs, small towns, and ordinary homes. People were told they were being treated. They were told their pain mattered. They were told the pills were safe enough to trust. But dependence does not care whether a drug comes in a bottle with a label. Withdrawal does not care whether it began with a prescription. Overdose does not care whether the first dose came from a doctor. As prescriptions rose, so did harm. Families watched people change. Patients found themselves needing more. Some were cut off with little support. Some turned to other opioids. Some never made it through. And when the crisis became impossible to ignore, the story began to shift. The respectability faded. The blame moved downward, away from boardrooms, away from sales targets, away from the people who built the market. The crisis was no longer framed as a business model. It became a story about bad choices, weak people, and dangerous streets. The people who profited stepped back. The people left with the damage were pushed to the front. Now the story had a new setting. Not the doctor's office, the street, not the executive, the addict, not the sales pitch, the scare campaign. America showed what the machine could do at full force. But this was never only an American story. In Australia, it moved differently, quieter, slower, less visible. But the pattern was still there. Here, too, prescription opioids moved through ordinary life, through pain clinics, GP rooms, pharmacies, hospitals, homes, oxycodone, codeine, morphine, fentanyl patches, tramadol, legal drugs, medical drugs, drugs with labels, instructions, and authority behind them. And here, too, the harm was not confined to the margins. By the mid-2000s, pharmaceutical opioids were involved in more deaths and poisonings than heroin. The crisis did not look exactly like America's, but it carried the same lesson. A drug does not need to be illegal to be dangerous. A market does not need to be criminal to cause mass harm. and respectability does not make a business model safe. But for the machine, opioid medicines were too quiet, too clinical, too close to home. Prescription opioid deaths were treated as a health problem. The machine needed something louder, a national emergency, a drug with a street name, a drug with a face. In Australia, that emergency was methamphetamine, ice.
Crime authorities today warned that Australia is in the grip of an epidemic of the drug ice.
Frontline health workers are being subjected to escalating violence, and the drug ice is to blame.
We're in the grip of the ice age. The dealing and use of the drug ice is now out of control, be it in regional areas or cities.
Police say Victoria is in the grip of a growing drug epidemic that's spawning murders and other violent crime.
Ice gave the media what prescription opioids rarely did: spectacle, erratic behavior, CCTV footage, police raids, emergency department horror stories. A drug that could be made to look foreign, violent, contagious, and out of control. They didn't try to understand drug use. They reached for fear instead. Fear was simple. Horror was useful. And looking tough on drugs mattered more than telling the truth. The public was shown faces, teeth, sores, mugshots, chaos. In 2015, as part of an $11 million federal campaign warning people about crystal methamphetamine, the Australian government spent around $1 million on a television advertisement that was, in effect, a rerun of an earlier campaign from 2007 to 2009. Side-by-side comparisons showed the same beats almost exactly.
As a doctor treating more and more people who use the drug ice, I see some terrible things.
I've seen people who can't sleep for days at a time.
Smoke it, some smoke it, not realising that's just as addictive.
No, I'm going out, please.
Ice destroys lives.
Families
it
apart.
tears families apart.
Get up!
Some ice users dig at their arms,
Some
feeling
ice
like bugs
users
are
dig
crawling
at their
under the skin.
feeling like bugs are crawling underneath.
And then there's
there are the psychotic
episodes.
reactions. This can happen
It's
anytime
frightening that
you use
addiction
it.
can happen in such a short time.
Ice destroys lives. Don't let it destroy yours.
Don't let ice
Authorised by the
destroy
Australian
you.
Government, Canberra.
The message had barely changed. Health academics criticized the decision, arguing that repeating the same fear-based campaign over and over was unlikely to work. Instead of asking what new evidence, new supports, or new strategies were needed, the government reached back into the cupboard and pulled out the same old horror reel. As with other drugs before it, ice began to lose its fear factor. The world had not collapsed. The suburbs did not burn. The monster story started to wear thin, so the machine needed new blood. In 2012, the bath salts zombie story went global. A horrifying attack in Miami was quickly turned into a drug panic. News outlets reached for the easiest explanation: bath salts, synthetic drugs. A man transformed into a monster. But the toxicology did not back the story. No bath salts, no methamphetamine, no opioids. Only cannabis was detected. By then, the myth had already done its work. The image had traveled further than the correction ever could. Zombie drug became a reusable headline. Bath salts, flakka, spice, fentanyl, nitazines, trank. Every few years, a new drug was given the same horror film treatment. A monster is easy to sell. The panic machine does not ask, why are people using? What has failed them? What is in the supply? Who is making the market more dangerous? It asks a simpler question. What image will frighten the public enough to justify more punishment? But it doesn't need to be this way. Other places have made different choices. Across Europe, some countries have moved away from prison as the default response to personal drug use. The models differ. None are perfect, but they show something important. Criminalization is not the only possible answer. Some countries went further. Heroin-assisted treatment is used in parts of Europe for people with severe, long-term opioid dependence, people who have not been helped enough by methadone, buprenorphine, or the usual system. It is not a free-for-all. It is supervised medical care for people who had already been written off. Portugal did not simply decriminalize drugs and walk away. It invested in treatment, harm reduction, health care, social support, and pathways back to housing, work, family, and community. Switzerland built services around harm reduction and heroin-assisted treatment. Neither country created paradise. Neither made drug use disappear. But there were real gains. Drug-related HIV infections fell. Overdose deaths fell. More people were connected to care. Some people were given stability, dignity, and time. That matters. Because you cannot punish people into safety. You cannot shame people into stability. You cannot arrest your way out of pain. When drug use is treated as a health and social issue, the question changes. Not, how do we frighten the public? Not, how do we look tough? But what would actually keep people alive? The panic machine tells us there is no alternative. But punishment was not inevitable. It was policy. Care was possible.
It may have been Camelot for Jack and Jacqueline, but on the Che Guevara highway filling up with gasoline. Fidel Castro's brother spies a rich lady who's crying over luxury's disappointment, so he walks over and he's trying to sympathise with her, but he thinks that he should warn her that the third world is just around the corner. Mixing pop and politics, he asks me what the use is. I offer him embarrassment for my usual excuses, while looking down the corridor